Hey, so we've been hanging out a lot with the idea of how we can better improve our overhead positions for things like split jerks, for overhead squats, and for so many people that comes down to being effectively externally rotated with the shoulder in that overhead position. And what I've seen a lot is that folks that use bands or unstable apparatus, like maybe a ring, just for example, to do an overhead stretch. Come on out with it, JJ. So it's actually possible for JJ to finesse and kind of cheat her way into different, what might be in suboptimal or less than great positions overhead. It's not necessarily the case that if we use a band to stretch this way, or we use a ring to stretch this way, that we're going to maintain the overhead externally rotated position. So we may actually be stretching and mobilizing ourselves into a less optimal position. So, while it's not necessarily a bad thing to use an unstable apparatus to stretch and prepare for overhead position, there are better ways that can provide some insurance policy against bad positions. So a common one and a popular one is to use box to mobilize for overhead. And one thing we kind of notice kind of neat about this, as JJ kind of hinges down into this position, the fact that her hands are locked in place here actually creates almost a systemic block to internally rotating. If she were now standing up tall, if she were standing tall with the elbow creases facing this way, that is elbow creases up, which is what we want. That's the externally rotate overhead position that we want. That's great. Come on up, JJ. The downside to working with the boxes is that kneeling down on the floor can be pretty tough on the knees, and you have to set up boxes, something like this over here, so that the boxes are easily accessible to athletes. That can actually slow things down. If you're a coach and you're leading a busy class, having all of these boxes out, maybe you don't want to take the time and set all that up beforehand, but what you always have available to you is wall space. So we've actually found a cooler and maybe a better way of doing this. So JJ is wanting to stretch and mobilize, for example, for push jerks, split jerks, whatever, shoulder press. If she places her hands to the wall and then hinges the hip to come down into this stretch, it's great because the hands here have a bony block, or it's going to be very difficult or maybe even impossible to internally rotate the shoulders there. If she were to find, come on up JJ, that her flexibility in her wrist isn't quite to where she can have her upper arms behind her head as she hinges into that stretch, she can compensatorily turn her hands out like this and hinge into the same stretch. She's still protected with the hands anchored here, this closed chain system. She's protected and anchored against internally rotating her shoulders. Additionally, you could actually use this as a strengthening drill, not just a stretch, but if we're placing our hands here, we can actually lean into it and try and turn our elbow creases up toward the ceiling. This is a strengthening drill. It actually developed the ability to better recruit the external rotators of the shoulder so we have better and safer positions. Show us a couple, JJ. Rotating up, relaxing to neutral, rotating up. Come on up, JJ, that's great. So maybe we're working on push jerks, split jerks, shoulder press, and this drill at the wall, no equipment required, super easy to do, including with a bigger class. It's got the insurance policy against the free range of motion internal rotation that can happen with bands or with rings. And we can flex this into an overhead squat or snatch position if we want to. So JJ can now place her hands wider, hinge the hips, and get that same stretch. And she's effectively protected through the shoulder against internal rotation during the stretch. It's stretching her into the position that she needs to be in for safe overhead exercise. Come on up, JJ. Again, if wrist flexibility is the limiting factor, she can turn her hands out this way, same drill from there, and now one more stretch for the less flexible wrist and forearm athlete, but it still achieves the end goal, achieves the objective that we want. So these are some thoughts, some of our musings today on how to improve your overhead position. Hope it's been helpful for you guys, and if it has, please subscribe. Talk to you guys again soon.